5, 4, 3, 2.
Thank you for joining us today for another session with Rabbi Levi Friedman. Hello, Rabbi. How are you?
Hi, Susan. I'm doing great, thank God. How are you?
Fabulous. Thank you. We're at Ask the Rabbi. And I would like to say a thank you to Compass Real Estate, which is located in Coconut Grove. It's our sponsor. And they're right next to Monty's in Coconut Grove. I don't know if you guys know where it is, but it's right there. And they're a really progressive real estate company. And they're good for all of your commercial and residential needs. So thank you very much for sponsoring us. I appreciate it. Rabbi.
Yes.
We're going to talk about something very interesting.
Okay.
Controversial.
Mm-hmm.
Basically what it is, it's when our dead friends and relatives visit us and show us they're still around. And it's completely different than what happens with our souls when we die. We're talking about people that have passed and then show us they're still around. And we get these feelings that they're around, friends and relatives and family members. So I don't know how, it may be uncomfortable for some people, by the way, this topic and this subject matter. I brought it up because things happen to me, and I'm sure I'm not the only one that this happens to, and I have lots of questions to ask.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's do it. I mean, we're live already,
I
so
know.
we
have no other choice.
want to say no. Yeah.
So I'll start with myself.
Okay, sure.
And
I'm very interested to hear what you have to say.
Okay, so one of the things that has happened to me in the past is I had Michael's grandmother. I was very close to her. Her name was Gigi. My name is Gigi.
Oh, that's
right. So she had passed, and I was standing in the hallway in my home and looking at her picture and thinking of her, how much I missed her. And all of a sudden, the picture literally popped off the wall and fell to the floor. And I was taken aback by it. And I thought, something's going on here. And other things have followed suit with me. I'm not going to discuss them. That's pretty much the only thing that I'm going to discuss right now about it. But is this real, or are we making it up? Am I crazy? I know other people have had these experiences. For example, people claim to see butterflies in groups or similar groups. Birds, for example, when they think of a member of their friends or relative that has passed, some people get a chill down their spine. So I'm wondering, what does Judaism say about something like this?
Okay, so I mean, this is definitely an interesting topic.
Yeah.
We're heading over to sort of paranormal activity and experience. So I think we should take a step back. I mean, whenever you're talking about topics such as this, you're talking about very subjective personal experiences that people have.
Yes.
And there's certainly enough that people have shared to take these things seriously, right? That
Yes.
so many people have one kind of experience or another is certainly something to take seriously. So let's go back a little bit, okay? So somebody passes away, right? So what happens? Right? I know that's not, you didn't want to talk about that today, right?
No, that's
About
okay,
what
but
happens.
if it
But okay, so
pertains to it.
Okay, so let's, as human beings, we are made up of a body and a soul, right? So we've got the body, we've got the soul. Death is the separation of body and soul, right? So death doesn't mean the end of life, right? We usually think of death as the end of life, but there's no such thing as life ending. Life is always going on. The life force in our bodies is our soul, and death means the separation of the body and the soul. So the body returns to its source, which is the ground. When God creates Adam, the first man, he creates him from the ground, and the soul goes back to heaven where it came from. So death is not the end of a life. When we think about life, and we think about even life in this world, right? Our living experience, and we think about the relationships and the connections we make in this world, what is it that we're connecting to? When we connect with others, when we impact others, or the meaningful experiences in life are all soul experiences, right? So the pursuit of the material, all of that is, those are things that do end. The physical, the material, those are things that at the end of life, they go and you can't take them with you, right? So all the money you make and all of the things that you've acquired and all of the, all of those, your fancy toys, none of that goes with you anywhere. They are physical things that remain in the physical arena, in the physical realm. But the soul continues on afterwards. The things that do continue are the spiritual things, the things that are not limited by physical time and space, right? And that would be the relationships, the connections, the kindness, right? The moral choices that we make. Those are all things that endure, right? Which is why also, maybe just to get slightly off topic, but the idea of a good deed, when we do something good, that is an eternal act. That's an act that lives forever. Whereas a bad deed is something that's destined to end eventually. It's not something that lives on in eternity. And so our souls are eternal, and those parts of our lives, the spiritual side of our lives, are things that continue. They continue eternally. And so it would follow then that when a loved one passes away, you have somebody who you were close with, somebody you connected with, you bonded with. That connection is more of a spiritual one. Sure, it's confined and limited to the time and space and the material and the physical and the seeing the person, what they look like, and so on. But really, the connection transcends all that. And so after they pass away, with the soul still going and still living on, that relationship endures and remains. Okay, so that's, I think, an important thing to recognize before we even start that conversation, is really this idea that the soul lives on, and therefore those relationships remain. So after a person's parent passes away, they still remain their parent, right? Or a person's grandparent. They still that relationship still endures. Okay. Now the difference is obviously that it's not physical anymore, right? It's not a physical relationship. And so therefore that relationship could really take on all kinds of forms that are that would be unusual, or form that you didn't. I'll give you, I guess, an example in a sense of how something personal, I suppose. A number of years ago, my grandmother passed away. I was very close with her, and a few months after she passed away, we had one of our children was born, a boy, and his bris was on a day that was very difficult for my family that's out of town to come to be able to celebrate with us. My father-in-law came, and that was it. No, not my mother-in-law, my parents, nobody else managed to come from out of town. It's always nice when you're having a nice life cycle event to have as much family as possible, but we're used to it already, living far away from our parents and many of our siblings. At any rate, so this was just a few months after she had passed away, and it was a big deal. They couldn't come and apologize, and we can't make it, and we wish we could be there, and so on. Anyway, at the bris, I was very mindful of the fact that we were, in a sense, somewhat alone. As far as our family, we were kind of alone on the one hand, but on the other hand, I felt this strong connection with my grandmother. I just felt that she was there with me. And that was a feeling I didn't have about my parents, who I knew wanted to be there, who had been thinking about us, who I knew were, a 1,000 miles away, celebrating and maybe, toasting what was going on, who I spoke to right before and was going to speak to right afterwards. But it was my grandmother whose presence I felt most. And that was a very powerful experience for me. It was one of those moments where you realize that even after somebody's passing, that they still are present in your life. I think something that people might relate to, people who lose parents or grandparents, and suddenly they find themselves quoting them all the time. Yes. Right? Is that something you've noticed? That's something I've noticed, where I've known people and I've never heard them talk about their parents, and suddenly everything they say, they're quote from their father, or quote from their mother, or quote from, right? What is that about? Right? So the point is that relationship endures. And so the fact that there could be, moments or experiences where you feel that presence, or you feel that connection, or you feel some kind of a communication, that's not at all surprising.
So you said that you felt as though your grandmother was there. So that was real.
There was nothing spooky that happened. There was
Correct.
nothing out of the ordinary. I just, for some reason, with everything I was focused on during that day and everything that was going on, she was just an inescapable part of my experience that day.
So when things happen to me, I think to myself, this isn't real. I got to be crazy. What
You
know?
might be, by the way.
Oh,
It's,
don't.
I don't even mean that. I'm not. No, that could be. It's
I'm
certainly
crazy.
possible.
You've known me a long time now. You're telling me. Thanks.
No, well, I mean, I don't mean that in a negative way. I don't
Susan
mean
the
that,
crazy one.
No, I don't mean that in a negative way. No, but I'm saying that's why I said before.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of these experiences can be very, very personal and therefore can be very subjective. And sometimes you might not be able to distinguish between a real, let's say, authentic experience and just, you know,
Well,
being a little crazy sometimes. I'm getting a dirty look from the
Yeah.
from the audience here, but you know that's
But-
possible too.
But the thing is that I and I can only speak personally. Oh, you know what? Better yet, I'll bring up a friend of mine, Linda.
Okay.
Her mother passed, and she was very close to her mother, and it was her mother's birthday, and she was in her backyard. I remember so specifically, and she was in her backyard, and she says, "Mom," she looked up. She says, "If you can hear me, send me a sign of something," and I am not exaggerating, and I saw it for myself. A red balloon, her mother's birthday, a red balloon fell down. You know how they float sometimes? Fell down right into her yard. And sometimes you pause and you go, how can that be? The odds of that happening. So things like that have happened to me. I know they've happened to other people. People don't talk about it too much because we feel a little like,
Right.
the chances of that don't, they always poo-poo it off.
Right.
But Judaism,
Well, that's a big part of Judaism. This idea of that connection, you know, the connection that endures long after a person passes
so
away.
you've experienced it yourself, the connection when you
Yeah.
felt as though they've been around.
Yeah. Yeah. So as far as
Okay.
signs and things like that, yeah, you hear stories. It's certainly not something that's unfamiliar to me, and you hear plenty of things and plenty of experiences. Not to mention, just yesterday, a friend of mine shared about somebody who just passed away last week, and this is, I guess, a different topic, but it's some talk about like an unwitting prophecy. Somehow, people before they pass away sometimes will say things that, in retrospect, you realize that they were basically predicting their own demise in a strange
Yes.
kind of way. That's a different topic. But the point is that, you don't have to be prophetic to have such kinds of experiences on occasion. And it's why it's tricky, I think, is because it's hard to sometimes make sense of it. And sometimes you can be open to things and there's a sign, let's say, that you would receive that is unmistakable. And sometimes you sort of
Question it.
No,
No?
I think you willfully talk yourself into things sometimes
Yes,
as well.
that's
so
what I
it's
think
hard
happens
to, right,
sometimes,
for
right.
sure. So
Right.
so you have to really be able to separate those things. I think the key is like this. I think the key is that people who pass away, so people who are on the other side, right? They are in a world of truth. We live in a fake world, a world of falsehood, right? Where truth doesn't always prevail and truth is not always apparent. But in heaven, right, after a person passes away, they're in the world of truth. And what it means to be in the world of truth means to see everything clearly and accurately. And since there's this connection, there's this bond. So when somebody from the world of truth is going to, you feel like they inspired you or you connected with them in some way, shape, or form, the way to know whether it's real or not is whether it's something that has a positive impact on your life, whether it's something that leads to positive change, to living a more true and authentic life in this world, right? If not, it's not likely that you're getting that kind of message.
Yeah, only
messaging from them.
positive messages.
Right, but it's not. But to see, that also sounds quaint to say only positive messages.
Okay.
Right, it's like, okay, it sounds a little bit more like a fairy tale. But what I
Yeah.
mean is, since we're talking about a world of truth where truth endures, right, and where they see things clearly, that would be the point. And so another, I think a very important point in general when we're talking about people who've passed and the connection with them, is that you say, oh, they've gone to the world of truth, or they're now in heaven. So the common thing is they're in a better place, right?
Yeah.
And Judaism, while that's all true, Judaism emphasizes the importance of being in this world that seems fake, the world that has untruth and evil and struggle. This is the world this is sort of the main stage.
Well, because we have a mission
creation.
here.
Correct. And so, in a sense, the tragedy of death is when a person's mission is over and they no longer could partner with God, as it were, where they no longer can have that kind of impact. That's a sad thing.
Mm-hmm.
And what we can do is we can help them. So you often think people passed away, they're in a higher place, or and they can be impactful and helpful to me. Well, that's true to an extent in that they can be impactful in helping us find some clarity in maybe an otherwise unclear situation. But in the end, we can help them more than they can help us, in the sense that we can be their hands and feet. We can allow their lives to still be impactful in this world, which is a very unique gift that we can give them, and they can't really reciprocate. So there's a common Yiddish expression that say that when somebody passes away, they should be a good advocate for you on high, for the family, and certainly they can be, right? They can be, they advocate for us, and their legacy is a source of blessing, and it's all true. But beyond what they do for us, there's so much more that we can do for them. And I think that's an important sort of takeaway message from this whole conversation as well, is that this is where it's at, and whatever.
But it's also, sorry
to
interrupt you. Sometimes it's also a very source of comfort for people when they do hear from relatives that have passed.
Absolutely.
Now, is it made up in our minds? However, when things really, really happen more than once, I'm not as sensitive as people think I am. But in order for my relatives to hear me, they have to be really loud, because I kind of like poo-poo it sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes I get these loud messages.
You're saying in order for your relatives to get through to you,
yes,
they need to be loud. Okay.
Yes, and it startles me sometimes.
Mm.
So I'm wondering, is it made up? Am I crazy? I mean, these are all the things that go in my head.
Right.
So you're saying it's true? They are?
It depends. It's hard to know when it is or isn't, right? But that's what I'm saying, is that one of the ways to tell is if your relatives are in heaven, right? There is something, by the way, to be said about not disturbing people who have passed, right? They're in a different place. They've got an agenda. Their calendars are full in heaven. There's a lot going on. And it's sometimes, we would consider it sort of inappropriate to disturb them, to bother them. Let them be. Let them do their thing, right? The connection still remains. So the point is that if they're bothering, they're going through the trouble to communicate. So what is it that they're trying to communicate? Right? That's the question. And how does that, and how could that better your life, or how could it be helpful to them? There's in Kabbalah there's this fascinating episode that is regarded as one of the sources for saying Kaddish, which is so after a person passes away, so traditionally one of their children would recite Kaddish, a special prayer, 3 times a day in their memory, and it's beneficial to their soul. Where'd that start? So there's a story about the Rabbi Akiva, the great sage Rabbi Akiva, the Talmudic sage, some almost 2,000 years ago, who encountered a soul, a wandering soul, and who was not at rest, wasn't at peace. And he asked him, "What can I do for you?" And basically, this is where they have this conversation where the soul says, "If you can get my kid to say some Kaddish for me, that would be very helpful, and you can find some rest." So that's a very powerful story, but it's an illustration of a soul that can benefit from what their loved ones do down here in this world, right? And that theme really we find recurring in Jewish literature, this idea of us being able to help them. Right. So if they're communicating, maybe there's something that they need. Maybe there's something that went on in their lives that is unresolved that you can help resolve. Maybe
or just a forgiveness for them.
Maybe.
With my father, and I'll get personal here. I had not a very good relationship with my father, and after he passed, I had to do a forgiveness, and I think he appreciated it. There's also, you know, you hear stories where people get into almost a car accident, and they should have died, and you hear it often where they say, you know, my mother was there and she protected me, or my grandmother, and I just felt the presence was so strong. Is that real?
Yes, absolutely.
That is real.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, so I'm not crazy.
Not crazy.
Wow,
That's
thank
the big
you.
punchline today.
That's
the big
therapy.
takeaway.
That's going to save me a lot of money in therapy.
Yeah, it's very powerful.
Yeah.
But again, that's what you just said, and especially what you shared with your father. And thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
It's, you know, very personal.
And I told you
anecdote.
about that.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I was pretending there for the first time now for
Okay.
the camera, but you ruined that. So thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. No, but that's a very powerful statement and story, and that's also that idea that you know, that feeling that you had, or that led you to that moment of sort of forgiveness, was beneficial to him.
Yeah.
And he needed that. And so you would not have found rest until that would have been taken care of and resolved, for sure.
I have
And that's
not
a very
heard from
powerful-
him since.
Okay, so there you
So
go.
he's doing fine.
Yeah, that must be the case.
So my question is when they do come to us, are they asking for something in particular? What's their, we don't really know their mission.
Right. So it could be, and for that you should maybe talk to your local rabbi, you know, or some friends or
priest
some people that
or-
might know, or somebody who can
Oh,
maybe
I don't know
help
how
you.
the Catholics feel about it. Sorry.
I don't know. So,
Sorry. Okay.
But you know, talk to somebody that maybe can help you sort of navigate that, make sense of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And who's somebody who recognizes it to
Right.
be
But
true.
generally, I think a one size fits all remedy. I think that is in addition to whatever specific action and steps might need to be taken. You know, depending on the situation. But I think one general idea is whenever that experience can lead you to incorporate more good deeds in your life, more goodness in your life, to make some positive changes in your life, that certainly is benefit. And if that episode or that experience is sort of what propels you to that change, then that's a very beneficial result and impact on the soul, for sure.
There's some people who don't see or hear anything from the relatives.
Okay.
Doesn't mean that the relatives are not reaching out to them.
Well,
They just don't. They're not
Well,
sensitive, or they
well,
don't.
it could be, but again, you know, you don't always have to talk to remain connected, right? In fact,
yeah.
sometimes the people you're most connected with, you talk to the least even, and that connection still remains. So the fact that relatives are not reaching out is not a sign of some negative, aspect in the relationship. To the contrary, it could mean that everything is perfect, and that's why you don't hear from them. So I don't think that it's healthy for people to be waiting around or looking or expecting or hoping to hear from relatives who have moved on to the afterlife, which is not a great term, but let's use that term, right? That's not a good thing to do. We need to focus on living life in this world. The best thing we can do for those who have departed, for those who we love, is live our lives fully, to live our lives happily, and when they see that we're doing well and that we're happy and that we're having a positive impact in this world, then they're happy and they're at peace.
You know, I was teaching the prison system, as you know, for 8 years. One of the inmates was in prison when her husband passed, and she was really struggling with it, and she wasn't able to go to the funeral, nothing. It was terrible. And so what she did, what I suggested that she does, is every time she does a good deed, do the good deed in honor of her father. So think about your father or whoever it is, and then do a good deed. And to me and to her, that was such a relief for her to do something like
That's
that.
great,
So
yeah.
you're talking about something like that,
Right.
doing
Yeah, absolutely.
good
And that's a
deeds.
very Jewish value. You know, you talk about charity that's given and things that are donated, or campaigns that are launched in the memory of somebody, or that is all for their benefit. It's all for their benefit.
Yeah.
And we believe that since that relationship remains and continues and could continue to flourish, so just as during people's lifetimes we want to help each other out and we want to be accommodating and do for them, the same is exactly true after their lifetime, and in a sense even more so afterwards as well. When you're there, when you are the one who has to do it for them,
Yes.
So it takes on a greater urgency and even more meaning, and creates even greater connection between you and them. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Wonderful. How much time do we have? 5 minutes. What do you want to say and about this subject, and what can you tell somebody who's experiencing this and give them some comfort?
So some people find comfort in these experiences, right?
Mhm.
Some people find incredible discomfort in these experiences. So that the message would be in a way different, right? For depending on what the nature of that interaction might be. But again, as I said, once a person passes away, they no longer have that ability to have an impact in the physical world, right? And of course, everybody's life, like, you know, Jewish tradition is that we all are given a set amount of days, and that every person passes away in their time, exactly their time, not a day earlier, not a day later. And we're given a mission in life. Now, sometimes, even though we've satisfied or fulfilled our mission, our purpose in the time that we were given, sometimes there is some unresolved issues. There's some open balances that have to be taken care of. And so we shouldn't look at death as the end of anything. Right? It's the beginning of a new chapter, perhaps, but it's not the end. And the fact that the person's passed away means that now those who remain here in this world need to finish that job for them on their behalf, right? And so if there's that kind of, so I would say that the general, the general normal sort of condition should be that you don't communicate much, that you don't hear from them, that you live your life, they live their life. That bond remains. You're mindful of them. You think of them. Sometimes you can talk to them. But this idea of sort of an interaction that has some kind of physical expression, and pictures falling, or balloons landing in your yard, things like that are unusual, out of the ordinary. And you think that's sort of asking more of them.
But
to
you
sort
can't
of engage.
deny that it happens.
I'm not denying that it's happening. I'm saying that it demands a little bit more of them to be a little bit more actively involved in this world than they otherwise should be, right? So in the spiritual sense, that connection is, as I said, it can flourish. But that's the idea that we should be living in this world more fully on their behalf.
Okay.
And so if there's some kind of a connection that seems to be unusual, that's unsettling, that's a sign that you need to take some real steps,
And
some
to help them.
to help them in some way. Yeah, I
whether it
wouldn't
be
worry about them.
No.
Not necessarily, they're I'm sure fine, but but whether it means to forgive them for something that they've done, whether it means to make amends for something else that's happened, absolutely, whatever that might be.
Okay.
So to take it seriously, to investigate it a little bit, and try and figure out what it is that you can do to help them.
Very
But
good.
again, that's the point: is that we can help them more than they can help us. Right? This is it sort of relates to our conversation about angels.
Yes.
Right? Souls are very different than angels, as we know. Even
Yes, two
departed
totally
souls are
different things.
beyond angels as well. But this is where it's at, and this is where we need to be living our lives, and this is where our focus should be: is right here, right now, in this moment.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Thank you, Rabbi. I really appreciate it. We'll see you next week.
We'll see
You
you
have a
next
class
week.
tonight
We have a class tonight.
at 8 o'clock.
Yeah,
Very
talking
good.
about some fun stories. We're going to be talking about the flood tonight.
Oh,
The Great
good.
Flood.
Look forward
Yeah.
to it.
Great.
Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.